Welcome to Book World: The Great Escape. I'm author CJ Peterson, along with my co-host over here, author Michael Scott Clifton. Today we have a special guest, author Phyllis Still. Today we're going to be talking about historical fiction. Before we get there, Mike, how was your week?
It's been a good week so far. We've actually had almost a week's worth of no rain. So,
Impressive.
yeah. So the pond, Lake Clifton, the lake below our house, our pond, has dried up sadly. So I don't guess I'll be selling any fishing licenses now. But Melanie and I did attend the Longview Art Walk last Thursday. And it usual spot downtown, historic downtown Longview, and we were in the Vera Bank lobby, and Patty Wiseman, another fellow East Texas author, was there. We did pretty good. The weather was perfect, absolutely perfect, and a lot of people were out. Maybe not as much as you might have expected, but I think that had something to do with the fact that normally they have that art walk in July and not in June. But my understanding from talking to the director that they're going to try to start having it in June now to take advantage of the better weather. It's not so hot. So I think that's a great idea, and I hope they continue doing that.
Well, that's good. Plus, it also spring would get it out of like tornado season. And
Right. Just better weather, and there's nothing. And since 90% of the booths are outside, it's always good if you get better weather.
I'm just saying, being a June baby, that June is just like the perfect month for stuff. I'm just
It's a
saying.
great month, I have to admit. Yeah,
I'm
much
just saying.
better than July, and especially better than August. So.
I'm just saying.
Although my wife was born in August, so I can't say that. That's got to be a good month too. Um, so the next book event that Melanie will be at, really looking forward to, is the Mississippi Comic Con, which is in Jackson, Mississippi. That won't be this coming weekend. It'll be the following weekend on June 22nd and 23rd. It's held at it's the convention center. I'm not sure that's what they call it there. We went last year for the first time, and it was absolutely fabulous. There, what you always want to see at these Comic Cons is a lot of people there, traffic, and that place was filled from one end to the other, and they had some awesome guests, and we did real well. Matter of fact, sold out of a couple of my books, which. I look back at that now and say with kind of regret. I mean, it's a great problem to have, but had I brought some more, we could have done a whole lot better. So hopefully this year we'll follow up and have the same kind of success with the right amount of books this time.
There you go. Well, my birthday was this last week, so I'm
Happy birthday.
I will own my years. I am 52. I will own every single one of those. I figured I earned them. I will own them.
You don't look a day over 29, CJ, so you're doing good.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I'm 52. I own them. So I am excited. It's my birthday month. I celebrate all month long. So we do like little projects through the month, and we do like little things to celebrate it throughout the entire month. And I celebrate all month long, so I'm excited for that. Our next event, as I said throughout this time, is going to be the Piney Woods Comic Con in Lufkin, Texas. That's going to be August 17th and 18th. I do happen to know they've already announced that Kevin Sorbo will be there. I know they've also announced Carla Perez, who was Ruby something. She was the Power Rangers bad guy. She's going to be there. I don't know. They've announced any other ones yet, but I do know there are some really good ones that are going to be there. I will be there running the floor like the maniac that I normally am. Trevor will be there as well. I do happen to know that I do believe Mr. Mike will have a booth there. Vendor spots have opened, so make sure to get your vendor slots in there for those who want to be vendors. It's going to be a good one. Our regular team will be there running it, having lots of fun. Lots of fun things happen throughout those weekends, so I'm super excited. Let me think. Otherwise, just classes going on as normal. I'm still up in Oklahoma dodging tornadoes and having fun. At this point, just dodging rainstorms. I think the last tornado we had was about a week or so ago.
Wow.
Otherwise,
last time it rained, right? Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah, something like that. But that's okay. It's all in good fun. We have a tornado shelter. It's good. It happens. But today our special guest is Miss Phyllis A. Still. and she does historical fiction. Being a multi-genre author, you have a couple that are historical fiction, so I can appreciate her writing. And I do happen to know that with historical fiction becomes a lot of research to make sure even something down as simple as bobby pins. So, welcome, Miss Phyllis.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So, for those who don't know your writing, can you kind of explain a little bit about what you do write and what it looks
Well, so I started um, the project with it's a 4-book series. When I found out that I had ancestors that were in central Kentucky in 1780, and the British came down from Fort Detroit with a hundreds of Indian, Native Americans and Canadian force. You know, the joint forces came down into central Kentucky with a cannon, and their goal was to take out George Rogers Clark originally, but the Native Americans would not go that way until they took out these settlements in central Kentucky. Anyway, my ancestor was 18 years old with an 18-month-old child, and they were all herded off and also canoes, about a 500-mile trip to Fort Detroit.
like? Goodness.
Some some did not survive, but my 18-year-old ancestor with her 18-month-old child survived, and that it was the beginning of the imagination, the spark that said, okay, an 18-year-old had to have survival skills. What was her young adult life like to be able to know what plants and bugs and whatever to eat along the trail, because they had no food. The Native Americans killed off all of the livestock and all of that. So anyway, so I embarked on this project back in 2008 as a NaNoWriMo project, and I completed the 50,000 words and then added more words. And I thought, yes, I've got my novel. And then I sent it to an editor who informed me that I needed a lot of work. I didn't even know what a character arc was.
Oh, wow.
You know, it was all about life back then. And so 80,000 words of no. And she said,
Oh, no.
she's the one that suggested that I break it up into a young adult series
Hmm.
and then give each, you know, because she could tell there were sections. So she thought it would be good, break it down, make it young adult, you know, and then develop it as, you know, the plot line and the character arc. And so that's kind of what I did. I got to take one of the things that I love about history, writing the historical, is my world is already built.
Hmm.
All I have to do is decide on the time and the place and the character. I get to bring that character to life, and in the fictional world, you know, I get to give them a voice. And so that's what I wanted to do with this character. She actually turned 13 years old in 1775, and they lived in what is now West Virginia, and actually Greenville, West Virginia. Her father's land centered Greenville, West Virginia, and ran north and south. And then right across Indian Creek was the actual Fort Cook, where she grew up. But in my fictional world, it was in a different location, because at that time, I didn't really know where for sure his land was. I knew he had land. And it wasn't until the first book was already at my publisher when I decided to contact a historian from that area who informed me my character could have walked to the fort in 5 minutes. Instead of in the story, it's an actual like overnight trip. So we just oh, okay. My publisher said, no, you're not going to go rewrite the book. It's fiction.
Hmm.
So that's one of the things with fiction. Like, yes, it's you want to try to be historical as possible, but use the history as a backdrop, so that it's not about life back then. It's about the character. It's about what this character lived through and went through, and how they changed, just like any other story.
Right.
But so I like I said, I started 2008. By the time I finished rewriting the first book as a single, and it was 2016 was actually published. And I had to learn how to write during that time. It was good, good practice. So then, actually, a year later, I came out with a second book because, like I said, most of it was kind of there.
Mhm.
The third book took another year or two. That one. But what I enjoyed doing was I started with her young adult, the earlier years around the Indian Creek. And then the second book, I have them taking this trip to Kentucky, even though she didn't in real life go there yet. But I wanted to pull in what was happening in the Western territories during
Mhm.
the American Revolution, because that was one of my things too. And I heard the stories like, what did Kentucky and Canada have to do with the American Revolution? Well, I didn't know. All of these settlers were, in the Appalachia and the Shenandoah Valley, and they were the Western defense against the British, who were also paying the Native Americans to come and raid these settlements because they did not want these Western men joining the Eastern war effort that was going on. The
Mhm.
Western frontier, the men that were used to fighting the Native
Mhm.
American. They were used to that guerrilla warfare like you see in the Patriot. And so, no, the British didn't want them in getting involved because they're the sharpshooters. But anyway, so they were busy defending their families, from these attacks and stuff. So that's what happened. But anyway, so I pull in the Shawnee culture in the third book because I allow my character to be kidnapped in the second book. And then I don't know if you're familiar with Boonesboro, there was actually uh, Daniel Boone's daughter and a couple of other girls that were actually kidnapped, taken into a canoe and kidnapped for. And I had my writer friends were telling me, well, you're gonna have to include the character. She's gonna have to be kidnapped with them, and no, that's too famous of a story. I couldn't pull her into that. And so it's like, no, you can't do that. It's not that much fiction, when
Mhm.
it's a really well known story. So I had her being kidnapped, but it was like before their thing happened.
Hmm.
So I didn't have to deal with any problems that way. So, but anyway, I've enjoyed writing the series, and I ended the fourth book with her happy for now and in her marriage to who she marries. And then, because I have in mind that the rest of her story needs to be nonfiction, it needs to be the biography
Hmm.
because there's eyewitness accounts of all of that happened after, and their trip back when they were prisoners of war. They were finally released in 1782 during a prisoner exchange. And so there was another tragic stuff that happens with that. But anyway, I have distant cousins that want the actual nonfiction book now. So, but
So what's your writing is sort of fiction, sort of nonfiction in doing it. You took the nonfiction, put a little bit of a fiction spin on it.
well, the four book series is completely fictional. I totally got to make up her whole entire early part of her life because it's not documented. Anything wasn't really documented until these forts that were attacked. It's the Ruddles and Martin Station um, forts, and there's eyewitness accounts. There's a website even that's dedicated to the whole story. It's a very famous in Central Kentucky
Mhm.
story, but you've never heard of anybody else. Nobody else ever heard of. But they even have like a gathering every year, like a reunion every year. And I got to go one year. It was really nice to get to see the area. And
Hmm.
yeah, so
Wow.
that was fun. But
But all of that's after. These 4 books are all before.
yeah,
Right.
Got
so
it.
I decided I originally wanted to make that was going to be part of the original book. And that was the thing, 80,000 words. And I had her go from teenager to this whole story is all in one book, and it was all like run together, and yeah, big mess. But
So
I
are
just
you gonna write? Are you gonna write the after?
I'm going to write the after only as a nonfiction book. I'm going to make it a biography. Yeah, because I didn't want to spend another however many years writing. It would take at least 3 more books to write it as a
Wow.
fiction.
Wow.
I didn't know. I was like, now's the time to write it as an actual biography to pull the whole real story together now.
So it sounds like you did a lot of, in fact, I know you did a lot of background research for this,
Mm-hmm.
particularly since you had a family connection there, ancestors. But you did make a comment I was going to ask you to kind of follow up on. Uh, your 4-book series is a work of fiction, but
Correct.
by the same time, you wanted the depiction of the times and the people to be historically correct.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, did at times you find that hard to balance?
Not really, because as I researched, I uncovered a whole lot of things that were going on in that time that all I had to do was pull into the plot. Like there really were loyalists and patriot spies. You know, there were double agents, and all of the forts were built like 15 miles apart, and so you had scouts, fort scouts, and they did this, 15 miles like every day. You know, they would meet in the middle and they would exchange information and take it back, and that was how all the information kept getting passed around. They knew what was going on in the east, with all of the battles going on in Lexington and all of that. Um, but they had all, like, said, all of their own stuff that was going on,
So
just maintaining their families.
So is your 4-book series? Is it? I think you. I thought I heard you say when CJ asked you a question earlier that is it young adult? Is this a young adult series, or is it new adult, or is it pretty much for anyone from young adult to adult?
I would say 13 and up, but I've had 10, 12-year olds that really enjoyed it. But most of my fans are actually adults. I think more adults read young adult, you know.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Young adult historical, because my character goes from 13 to like through the series. So it's a progression. Each book can be read individually, but I bring back characters. I pull in characters from the first book or the second book, and kind of build on it. And like I said, I wanted to cover not only the West Virginia, Kentucky, um, and the Shawnee culture, and bringing all those elements together, because that's what ends up happening in real life is the things that were going on with the Shawnee culture, and all that was going on there, things that were going on in Kentucky territory. And then you had, where they were in Appalachia. And at that time, it was all Virginia. So you might be researching your ancestors, and they may say something about they were from Virginia, but they actually might have been in Kentucky.
All right,
It
right.
was like, wow, I didn't know any of that.
I know when I wrote my well, and I did a time travel book, and then I wrote a short story that was historical fiction, and it's like I came up with a concept I had heard about where like Cromwell outlawed Christmas. And it's like, okay, that's a really cool concept. And so I sent them back in time to that point. And it's like when I started researching it, you learned all sorts of fascinating things about that particular time. How did you come up with I mean, I realized you had researched your person. When you went back in time, is that kind of the same idea where you had that concept and you went back and started learning all sorts of really cool things about that particular time?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, because whenever my editor told me the first thing that I needed to do was separate it out into individual books, then I had to start, well, what am I going to make the first book about? What am I going to do? Well, that's when I started finding out about the network of scouts,
Mhm.
and then there were actual things that were going on that um, the loyalists were starting to stir up issues and problems and stuff. And so I have in the first book, it was easy then to pull in her my character's father, because he's also known to be a surveyor, road surveyor and all of that sort of thing. Well, I ended up making his survey trips, like actual, secret missions and stuff. And she comes across these documents and there's riddles on them, and she can't figure out what's going on. And then she actually observes her father giving documents taking documents from a known, patriot neighbor and passing them on to unknown loyalist. And so now she thinks her father is a loyalist spy. He's endangering the family. And she's 13. She does not like that. That's why the first book is called Defiance on Indian Creek. So it's not just her being defiant. It's even what was going on with the whole loyalist and patriot stuff. So I pulling all of that in. And that's the thing. It's like I have several binders of research, but you have to narrow it down. You have to find your plot, which is my point. You got to go through all of this stuff in order to narrow down your plot, and then make the history things that you're pulling in have to be related to the plot. And and only what is necessary, here's what they wore, here's what they ate, here's how they cooked, here's what they had to deal with, in their daily life. But you don't want it to be about their daily life. You have to come up with that same strong plot line that this character is going to have to make some changes, or things are going to be complicated. I have a lot of twists in my stories. I have a lot of conflict. She's the oldest of 8 children. They all live in this cabin. She shares the loft with her brother and her 2 sisters, so I have 3 daughters myself. And through the teen years, I had to share a bedroom. So I'm able to pull in that dynamic of the personality clashes and the jealousy or whatever, little stuff like that, because she's the oldest and she's bossy. And
Well, even the closest thing is interesting. Like I said, I pulled mine from 2024 and I took her down to 1813. And the clothes were torment back then. But you
yeah,
have to do the research and actually finding the clothes for that time period. What
yeah.
exactly were they? You
Except
know.
that, one of the positive thing on that too is I'm not doing the colonial, normal, colonial look. They were in the Appalachia.
Mhm.
And there are
Oh, so yours is a little bit less forgiving, yeah.
there are ministers that went through that area that commented on these women aren't even wearing corsets.
Well,
Yeah, my poor girl was in a corset. She's just like,
Yeah,
"What is
no,
this
mine,
contraption?"
they grew up barefooted and simple homespun clothes. And
well,
they
Phyllis, you said that you plan on having a 5th book, which is a follow up to your 4-book series, which is basically going to be nonfiction biography. So, do you have any other projects in mind, future projects in mind that you'll be working on?
Yes, this is. I have three projects all together that I'm taking turns on, because the working on nonfiction and is really hard. And one of the other projects I am working on is a memoir, which is also hard because it pulls in emotional stuff. So then I take a break from those things and I'm working on cozy mystery, my first cozy mystery. And I know for sure it'll be it'll be at least 3 books. I'm not really into 20 book series or whatever.
Right.
3 or 4, I'm good.
Mhm.
Because I'm ready to do something else by then.
Right.
Like I said, by the time I finished this 4th book, and it's like, okay, I'm done. It took me 16 years to write 4 books.
Well,
But
hopefully
in
you're
that
a
4
little bit
books,
more
though,
polished. Yeah.
I was gonna say in that 4 books, though, there's a lot of research that goes
Yeah.
on with that.
There's a
Because,
lot.
like I
There's a
said,
lot.
when it comes to historical fiction, you have to know your stuff. I wasn't joking when I said bobby pins. Um, when you think about it, bobby pins didn't hit till the early 1900s. I think it
I
was.
don't know.
It wasn't 1813. I could tell you that because my editor caught me on that. I'm just like, oh yeah,
Okay.
nope, they
Right.
can't have bobby pins back then. So it's like
Mhm.
you have to make sure that whatever it is was invented at that point.
Yeah, it's true. But again, like my publisher kept telling me, it's fiction.
It
You know,
is, but
Yeah,
if
yes,
there's
you
certain
want
things
to, but
that weren't.
I'm sure people can read through my books, and if they're really historians, are gonna nitpick. Yeah, can nitpick
Mhm.
it. You
But if
can.
something as
But
simple as like bobby pins, they're gonna know that okay, nope, they weren't
yeah,
there then.
yeah. But how
So
many? But then you get into the common normal readers, especially young adult. They don't know and they don't
mhm.
care.
no,
They want a good story. They want a good character. They want a reason to turn the page.
right,
Yeah,
Well, we
right.
have a few minutes left. Do you have any advice for somebody who wants to write historical fiction?
I do, and I think I may have mainly already said it. It's like it can't be about daily life, and yes, it's got to be as accurate as possible, but not to the extent where it's slowing your story
Go
down.
down. Yeah.
Mhm.
And you want to keep the focus on your characters and the action, and you want to keep it moving forward.
Mhm.
You come up with a great story plot for this character to have to deal with, and you just go with it. Because in reality, I think all genres have historical fiction element to them. Even The Hobbit, how many chapters did he spend developing the whole world? And they had this history, and so even your characters in fiction, they have a history, and they live in a place and a time, and that place and time has history. So if you wrote the historical fiction version of your fantasy book, it's kind of the same concept to
Right,
me.
right, right.
Yeah, it's all in how you spin it, and it's all in how you
Hmm.
lay it out. And as you've talked to other authors, you just kind of got to sprinkle it. If you dump it, you're going to lose your reader.
Even
Right.
even in fantasy, which is you were talking about with Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, um, the world you create has to be consistent with the story that follows.
Hmm.
And I think in fantasy that's a big deal. And if you write science fiction, and I know CJ's had a book or two that is science fiction ish, if not.
Most of mine are at some point.
And I've written a science fiction book. The science and what I tell people, and I'm so sure it's the same with historical fiction in your books. The science either has to be actual science or it has to be theoretical science that could be science. It can't be off the wall stuff that
Hmm.
makes absolutely no sense, and because people won't read that, it has to be something that that might happen, might exist, or maybe actually already does.
Well, like Star Trek, they had cell phones back then.
Yeah,
The pop-up phones
yeah,
that we just
communicator, yeah.
they had that forward thinking.
Hey,
Hmm.
my first cell phone, I got the communicator chirp as my ringtone back in. So
I
anyway, my
think your
wife.
ringtone is still the communicator chirp. I
No,
think you were talking.
that's Mission Impossible. But Melanie made me change it because it annoyed her so much. So I had to.
I sat in my dad's lap when the very first episode of Star Trek came on. We were watching it, and I was sitting in the chair beside him, and he did, and I said, "Are we going to watch this again?" He said, "No, he didn't like it. He didn't like the character with the pointy ears."
Spock.
And I was like, my husband and I grew up
Oh,
watching the reruns and watching all the movies, and
oh,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Thousands.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much,
thank
Phyllis, for
you.
joining us. You're a treat as always. For anybody who wants to learn more about Phyllis and her books, you can go ahead and head over to her website, which is phyllisastill.com. For those who are listening, it is spelled out Phyllis, the letter A, and then Still.com. Again, Phyllis, thank you for joining us.
Thank
Um,
you. I
we did
enjoyed
get
it.
a comment. Grandma dot dot says, "Excellent job, Phyllis and CJ and Mike. Very interesting. You know your stuff." So thank you for commenting. Uh, Make sure to stay tuned next week as we have April Coker, whose genre is Christian romance and suspense. We'll catch you guys next week at 4 o'clock, same time. See you guys next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.